tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it.
I've made a New Year's resolution to be better grounded, meaning to have a greater awareness of those not living in my bubble and to build better rapport. I have resolved to keep an open ear and be a better listener. Still, I won't be cowed. My analysis will continue to be evidentiary based. But you can look for me at Cracker Barrel, shopping at Walmart, driving my F-150 more and my sedan less. Maybe even lingering in the parking lot at Eagles home games instead of sidestepping all those tailgaters. In 2017, I am out to burst my bubble.
While researching the official government story, I saw a news flash that the 9/11 families wanted an investigation of World Trade Center 7. I was a bit surprised. Why would they be questioning the official story? That seemed a little out there, but who could be more invested than they were? So I listened to what they had to say.
Our perception of what happened on September 11th is very different from the general public's perception, I'd say, for the most part.
I believe that the public is still uninformed about most of the issues that are surrounding them.
I just don't think the public at all knows. They want to believe.
I think the truth sometimes can be frightening.
There's some deep explaining to do.
The bottom line is that it needs to be investigated.
We have to demand a new investigation. I want justice here.
Nobody ever stopped to have a scientific investigation. A scientific investigation.
I was nevertheless disappointed in reading the declassified report due to its lack of specificity. And when I said so last night via Twitter, man, the immediate harsh response was indicative of how, in this case, our partisanship doesn't stop at our borders. I tweeted last night, quote, "Where's the beef? Somebody please direct me to the evidence. I want to see more." And my observation caused something of a twitstorm. "It's classified, holy yes. Dang, I used to like you, but you jumped on the crazy train."
I found a pattern of bullying, intimidation, and belittling of anyone asking valid questions, which did nothing to soften my growing anger, even though I had no idea to where or to whom it was directed.
We're not buying it. Okay, you don't have to buy anything. You're American. You want to be a nut, you can be a nut.
Anybody who thinks that 9/11 was carried out by the government isn't a truther. They're idiots.
I'm merely saying it is wrong, blasphemous, and sinful for you to suggest, imply, or help other people come to the conclusion that the U.S. government killed 3,000 of its own citizens, because it didn't.
How big a lunatic do you have to be to watch two giant airliners packed with jet fuel slam into buildings on live TV, igniting a massive inferno that burned for 2 hours, and then think, well, if you believe that was the cause?
These people are idiots. They're mentally ill. They should be treated with respect. It's an insult to people who are victims of 9/11 and their families.
You know what? It wasn't an inside job. We can see the planes. The planes hit the building. It wasn't a controlled demolition, and the buildings came down. And it just is beyond bizarre.
Yeah, and you are a nutcase, Building 7.
9/11 was an inside job. Oh, get a life. Get a life. 9/11 was an inside job. You're like the guys who think that the space aliens kidnapped Elvis or something like that. That's where you are.
I didn't think it was an accident that every question is uniformly dismissed. I couldn't find a familiar journalist that seriously entertained these obvious questions that anyone would have.
Forces the public to have to choose sides, but we don't have enough to go on. Have we reached a point where a demand for answers earns such disdain? Here's how I followed up. I want an email. I want a text, an affidavit, an intercept, something. I'm a trial lawyer, and I deal in evidence, not generalities. People accuse me of doubting the findings. I don't. But given the stakes, I want proof, not just assessment. I admit I am quick to discount many sources due to the story's point of origin. My bubble is at odds with my roots. My grandparents were Pennsylvania coal crackers with Eastern European lineage. Both of my grandfathers had black lung from work in the mines. My parents raised my brother and me on a great middle-class street. I grew up on a house on a quarter-acre lot, 3 bedrooms inside there. We didn't have a shower till I was in the 8th grade. As a matter of fact, that bathroom renovation was performed by a prison inmate on work release. I went to public school, K through 12. My first job when I turned 16 was as a maintenance man at the local McDonald's. But as the years have passed, like others, I've unintentionally self-sorted. Nothing deliberate, but it's happened.
What did these families know that I didn't? It's obvious once you look they've been trying to say something is wrong, and we need to look at 9/11 more closely, especially Building 7. And they weren't alone. I found an endless sea of organizations, rallies, websites, books, and films about that day, but I never really heard about any of them on the evening news. The families and many others were pointing to World Trade Center Building 7, the last one to collapse. I wanted to research what was so special about Building 7. We were only a few days away from launching my new business when I shared with Betsy that I didn't think there was any harm in pushing it back a bit so I could look into Building 7 for myself. This news, combined with the controversial nature of what I was looking into, was met with less than enthusiastic support by my wife, even though she tried to hide it. It was understandable. Remember, our baby was due in a few months, and I was suggesting changes, but they weren't too big and she was okay with it, so I moved forward. And that's how it began. I didn't know it then, but I set us on a course that would lead our marriage to the brink of disaster.
Compelling evidence of my being out of touch with 46% of the nation. And then the Christmas break brought even further evidence that I've been living in a bubble. Mine is a virtual gated community, defined by things like my zip code or where our kids go to school, my graduate law degree, my political registration as a non-affiliate, my health consciousness, even the color of our Christmas lights, we favor white LEDs, and the TV shows that I watch. I'm more into The Crown than Duck Dynasty.
And if I thought I was a long way down the rabbit hole already, was I way wrong? My belief system would ultimately be shattered, but rebuilt to accommodate my evolving worldview. Back then, however, I was only a few months into my investigation, and I was going through a full scope of emotions, and frankly, having a difficult time handling all of them. Denial, curiosity, fear, disbelief, paranoia, anger, and heartbreak, and I would go through many more. I was still unable to reconcile all the data in front of me. I couldn't see the bigger picture at the time. But like the wind, it can't be seen, yet we know it's there because it leaves evidence of its existence. Very much like the trail of breadcrumbs I'd been researching over the last few months. But it's not something I could understand in one sitting. It took time. Coping with the flood of emotions took a while. I didn't have anyone guiding me or anyone to talk to about it. I felt like I had no foundation, like the ground was crumbling beneath me. The truth is hidden by several mechanisms, especially the limits of our own preconceived beliefs. I'd been so ignorant and dismissive, but now I wondered what else I'd been fooled about. Over the years, I came to see that we're in a battle of information, a battle of beliefs, or a spiritual battle, if you will. I also came to believe that 9/11 is only one battle in a much larger war, a war I couldn't see yet, but one that I was well on the way to discovering. This is a lot to take in, and we all wake up at our own speed, if at all, which is why I stopped after only looking at the Trade Center portion of the attacks. There is so much more to this, but it's easier to process in smaller chunks. Betsy and I woke up at different speeds. My eyes started opening pretty quickly, but it took Betsy a few years, even though we talked about it all the time. It wasn't until she watched early versions of this movie that she began to believe me. I clearly remember the day in June of 2013 when she came voluntarily and shared her own thoughts about her own 9/11 research, something she'd never done before. And I knew by talking to her that her eyes were finally opening too. It probably saved our marriage. Getting past that stumbling block opened the door for us to reconnect. If there's a pit in your stomach, don't be overwhelmed or scared. Whatever's behind all of this has been there for a long time, and I'm sure you've lived, loved, and laughed in that time. And you still will. The shock will wear off, and what will be left is a much better understanding of how the world works, which makes the bad guys' jobs harder. Over time, the discomfort and confusion subsided, and I went back to my life, with clarity and new hope for what's ahead. Today I'm able to laugh and be happy and look forward to the future like everyone else. I have all that, and I'm more aware of important things happening around me. So if you want to forget everything you've seen, go back to your regular life. Soon you'll forget about all of this. Our defense mechanisms work that way. But if you decide to jump down the rabbit hole, my advice is to seek your own answers, do your own research, and don't let anyone tell you what to believe about anything. Because until you see it for yourself, it'll be hard to ever understand why it's so important to know it exists.
learn, the less I'm able to wrap my head around it. So maybe that's part of the denial. It's all making me feel a little crazy.
I'm imagining what is it that keeps me from really believing or wrapping my head around these facts?
Here's your premise that's wrong. You are thinking that our brains are only rational, and they're not. Our brains are wired in part to deny unpleasant emotions. There is a part of our brain which is highly rational, analyzes data, takes in information, and then there's the emotional part of the brain. And the emotional part of the brain is extremely powerful.
And it feels more comfortable just to shut down the scientific part of my brain and just enjoy the right now, just do nothing.
You are not alone. I have dubbed the condition pre-traumatic stress disorder. I am hearing what the scientists are saying in my mind, playing it like a tape all the time.
I do.
Now, was there a specific incident that heightened this sense of vulnerability?
I remember my parents fighting when I was a little boy, and I was so scared of their anger towards each other, I ran into a room with my nanny. That's just what came up. I don't know why, but that sense of
try to think.
Fear and danger and,
Yes.
and instability.
Right.
It's just so unfathomable, the idea of change.
So there's the tension. In that space, while you're trying to find a peaceful resolution, you just kind of don't do anything.
Do you think those are coconuts up there?
What do you think they are?